What if everything you thought you knew about the crystal skulls was wrong? These perfectly carved quartz objects have fueled legends of lost civilizations and psychic powers for over a century. They stare out from museum displays and blockbuster films, symbols of an unknowable ancient world, but a fierce debate rages beneath the polished surface. Are they genuine relics holding forgotten secrets, or elaborate hoaxes born from a desire to believe? By the end of this investigation, you will know the definitive truth behind one of history's most captivating archaeological mysteries. We will uncover the 19th century con man who may have created them and reveal the microscopic evidence that shattered the legend. So where does the compelling power of these objects truly come from, if not from a lost past? The most famous crystal skull arrived with a story worthy of any adventure novel. In the early 1920s, a young woman named Anna Mitchell-Hedges claimed she found the object beneath an altar in a lost Mayan city in Belize. She described it as a perfect, lifelike cranium carved from a single block of clear quartz, missing only its jawbone, which she said was discovered nearby months later. This was not just any artifact. It was presented as a masterpiece of unknown technology, so flawless that it seemed impossible for ancient hands to have created it. The story was irresistibly dramatic, complete with themes of jungle exploration, forgotten temples, and a mysterious, gifted discovery. Yet from the very beginning, there were whispers that the entire tale was a carefully crafted fabrication. Anna's adoptive father, the adventurer F.A. Mitchell-Hedges, had never mentioned the skull in his own writings about that expedition. The skull's sudden appearance, wrapped in such a perfect narrative, was the first clue that its origin might be more fiction than history. This single object, now known as the Mitchell-Hedges skull, became the undisputed star of the crystal skull world, but it was not alone. Other institutions, like the British Museum and the Smithsonian, acquired their own versions. These skulls often came with similarly romantic, yet entirely unverifiable provenance. They were said to be from ancient Mexico, gifts from anonymous collectors, or relics of the lost continent of Atlantis. The stories sold newspapers and filled museum halls, but they lacked any solid archaeological grounding. How did these objects, with such shaky histories, capture the global imagination so completely? The final leap from obscure curiosity to household name came from the silver screen. The film Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull placed these artifacts squarely in the center of a blockbuster mythos, linking them to psychic powers, extraterrestrial visitors, and world-changing secrets. Suddenly, the Crystal Skull was not just a museum piece. It was a pop culture icon, a symbol of ultimate mystery. This powerful fusion of romantic legend and Hollywood fantasy created an almost unshakable belief in their ancient supernatural origins. But what happens when you look past the dramatic stories and silver screen glamour? What do the objects themselves, stripped of their legends, actually have to say? Its polished surface captures the light like still water, a human skull rendered in flawless, transparent quartz. The most iconic of all these artifacts, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, is a true marvel to behold. Unlike any other, it features a perfectly sculpted jawbone that detaches, engineered with such precision that it moves smoothly on invisible hinges. The entire object is carved from a single block of crystal, with no visible tool marks, no scratches, no signs of how it was made. According to Anna Mitchell-Hedges, this masterpiece was revealed to her on her 17th birthday, amid the crumbling stone altars of a Mayan city called Lubontan. She described the moment with cinematic clarity, the sun glinting off the buried crystal as she helped clear the ruins. The missing jaw, she said, was found 3 months later, not far from the original spot, completing the puzzle. It was a story of youthful discovery and ancient mystery, a perfect origin tale for a perfect object, but the archaeological record tells a very different and far murkier story. Anna's own adoptive father, the adventurer F.A. Mitchell-Hedges, wrote a detailed book about that very expedition and never once mentioned the skull. Not a single photograph from the dig shows it. No other team member ever corroborated Anna's account. The skull simply appears in the public record years later, already polished by a compelling narrative. This glaring absence fuels the belief that the skull has a much more modern origin. Many researchers now point to evidence suggesting it was likely crafted in Europe sometime in the late 19th century, a product of sophisticated lapidary workshops that supplied a growing market for exotic curiosities. The real mystery, then, is not where Anna found it, but how such an elaborate story was woven around an object whose true birthplace was probably a workshop, not a temple. So if the most famous skull story is built on such shaky ground, what does that mean for all the others held in the world's great museums? While the Mitchell-Hedges skull captivated with its personal drama, 2 other crystal skulls achieved fame through the prestige of their institutional homes. The British Museum acquired its own life-sized quartz skull in 1897, purchasing it from the famous New York gem dealer Tiffany and Company. Its stated provenance was equally mysterious, attributed to a Spanish soldier in Mexico, a story that could never be verified. Across the channel, the Musée du Quai Branly in Paris houses a similar artifact, often called the Paris skull, which was donated by the explorer Alphonse Pinard in 1878. Both objects are imposing and carved from solid blocks of milky quartz, yet they lack the intricate detail of the Mitchell-Hedges specimen. Their features are more stylized, their surfaces less perfectly polished, and they possess a heavy, almost blocky quality. Almost from the moment they entered their respective museums, the experts who cared for them felt a deep unease. The skulls simply did not look right. Curators noted that their features were unlike any artistic style known from pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. Ancient Aztec and Mayan depictions of skulls were highly symbolic, often shown in profile or decorated with specific motifs. These crystal versions, by contrast, looked more like anatomical models from a 19th century medical textbook. They were too perfect, too Western in their conception. How could an ancient Mesoamerican artist, working without such reference, produce a skull that so closely matched modern scientific understanding of human anatomy? This stylistic anachronism was the first major crack in the facade, a quiet but persistent doubt voiced by the very people who spent their lives studying genuine antiquities. The objects felt out of place not merely as artifacts but as art. If they were not creations of an ancient American world, then whose world did they come from, and what was the purpose of their creation? A heavy cardboard box arrived at the Smithsonian Institution in 1992, with no return address to hint at its sender. Inside, nestled in packing material, was a massive crystal skull, larger than a human head and carved from a single block of milky quartz. It was an anonymous donation, accompanied only by a brief typed note. The note claimed the skull was of Aztec origin, but it provided no details, no history, and no proof. For the world's largest museum and research complex, an institution built on verifiable knowledge, this was a mystery delivered by post. The skull itself was cruder than its famous counterparts. Its features were simple, almost cartoonish, with deep, circular depressions for eyes and a mouth that seemed to grimace. It felt heavy, not just in weight, but in unanswered questions. Who sent it and why go to such lengths to remain anonymous? Most importantly, why would someone part with such a seemingly significant object without claiming any credit? The very nature of its arrival suggested the donor knew the truth, that this was not a priceless Aztec relic, but a modern fake, and they were quietly offloading it to a place where it could do no more harm to their reputation. This single act, shrouded in secrecy, made the Smithsonian skull one of the most suspect of them all. Its lack of any provenance, its crude and stylized carving, and the suspicious circumstances of its donation all pointed toward a 20th century creation. It was this overwhelming cloud of doubt that finally pushed scientists to action. If the stories and the stylistic analysis were not enough to settle the debate, perhaps the crystal itself could speak. The time for speculation was over. The search for answers was moving from the shadowy world of antiquities dealers into the stark, unforgiving light of the laboratory. What secrets could a microscope reveal that a century of legends had kept hidden? To truly understand these enigmatic objects, we must listen to the story told by the stone itself. The skulls are carved from solid rock crystal, a form of quartz that ranks a 7 on the Mohs scale of hardness. This makes it tougher than steel, a substance that would have been nearly impossible for ancient artisans to shape with the flawless precision we see. Quartz forms deep within the earth under immense heat and pressure, crystallizing over millions of years. As it grows, it captures tiny time capsules within its structure, microscopic bubbles, mineral impurities, and fluid inclusions that are unique to the geological environment where it was born. These tiny flaws are like a crystal's fingerprint, and they hold the key to its origin. When scientists examined the crystal of the major museum skulls under high-powered microscopes, they made a startling discovery. The quartz in objects like the British Museum skull contained traces of a mineral called chondrodite. This specific impurity is not found in the quartz deposits of Mexico or Central America. Instead, its geological signature points squarely to sources in Brazil or perhaps even Madagascar, regions that only became major suppliers of quartz to the world in the 19th century. This was a devastating blow to the myth of ancient Mesoamerican origins. How could an Aztec or Mayan artifact be carved from a block of crystal that was still buried in a Brazilian mountainside centuries after those civilizations had fallen? The very substance of the skulls was betraying their carefully constructed histories, pointing not to lost temples, but to modern quarries and a bustling global gem trade. If the material itself is a product of a much later era, then the story of who made them and why takes a dramatic new turn. The stone itself was only the first witness. To find the true artist, scientists had to search for the fingerprints left by their tools. Under the intense gaze of a microscope, the polished surfaces of the crystal skulls began to tell a completely different story. Genuine pre-Columbian artifacts carved from hard stones like jade or quartz show distinct marks from the tools available at the time. Ancient craftsmen used handheld tools made of wood, bone, or stone, along with simple abrasives like sand or crushed quartz, to painstakingly grind and shape their work. This process left behind a characteristic surface, often with uneven, multidirectional scratches and a soft, almost waxy luster. When experts looked at the British Museum skull, they saw something entirely different. The crystal was covered in perfectly parallel, straight grooves. These marks are the unmistakable signature of a modern jeweler's lap, a high-speed rotating wheel that was not invented until the 19th century. This tool, used with incredibly hard, industrial abrasive powders, creates that flawless, machine-like polish. The most damning evidence came from the specific abrasive identified. The fine scratches on the skull were consistent with carborundum, a synthetic compound also known as silicon carbide. Carborundum was first invented in the 1890s and did not become widely available until the early 20th century. Its presence is like finding a modern power cord on an object claimed to be from the age of the pharaohs. It is a definitive anachronism, so an ancient Mesoamerican artist could not have used a tool that would not exist for another 400 years, nor an abrasive powder that was still decades away from being invented. This microscopic evidence closed the case for the major museum skulls. Their perfect surfaces, once hailed as proof of lost technology, were actually proof of a much more recent and far more mundane creation. The mystery was not how ancient people achieved such perfection, but why anyone would go to such elaborate lengths to make a modern object appear ancient. So where does this leave the romantic idea of a deep Mesoamerican past? The popular narrative insists these skulls are sacred relics of the Maya or the Aztecs, objects of immense spiritual power. But when we place them next to genuine artifacts from those cultures, the story completely falls apart. The ancient peoples of Mexico and Central America did work with crystal. Archaeologists have uncovered beautiful small objects made from quartz and other hard stones. We find delicate beads for necklaces, intricate ear spools, and small figurines depicting gods or animals. These genuine artifacts share a common theme. They are small, stylized, and symbolic. A Mayan crystal pendant might be the size of a thumbnail, carved in a way that emphasizes spiritual meaning over realistic detail. There is not a single example of a life-sized, anatomically perfect human skull carved from crystal ever found in a documented archaeological context in the Americas. Not one. The contrast in purpose is just as stark. For the Maya and Aztecs, small crystal objects were personal items, likely used in rituals or as status symbols. They were part of a known artistic and spiritual tradition. The giant Western-style skulls, however, serve no discernible purpose in that world. They do not match any god or symbol in Mesoamerican art. Their perfect scientific anatomy is a modern concept, completely alien to the way ancient artists saw and represented the human form. The idea that an Aztec craftsman would spend years, perhaps even a lifetime, using primitive tools to create a flawless, transparent skull for which his culture had no use, and then for that object to vanish without a single trace in the historical or archaeological record, stretches belief to its breaking point. The connection is not just weak, it is a modern invention, a layer of exotic fantasy applied to an object that never belonged to that world. If these skulls are not ancient Mesoamerican masterpieces, then the question becomes even more intriguing. Who in the 19th century possessed both the skill and the motive to create such perfect fakes, and what were they hoping to achieve? Yet even as science dismantled their historical origins, a new and more powerful legend was being born. Stripped of their archaeological credibility, the crystal skulls did not fade into obscurity. Instead, they were reborn as objects of pure metaphysical power. In the middle of the 20th century, a new wave of psychics and spiritual seekers began to claim that these were not man-made artifacts at all, but ancient data storage devices, repositories of wisdom from lost civilizations like Atlantis or Lemuria. The stories said they could channel cosmic energy, heal the sick, and even reveal prophecies about the future of humanity. One of the most influential figures in building this modern mythology was a man named Nick Nosrino. Starting in the 1940s, Nosrino dedicated his life to locating and studying crystal skulls, founding an organization called the Society of Crystal Skulls International. He was not an archaeologist, he was a psychic investigator, and he claimed to communicate with the skulls directly, receiving messages and information through a process he called channeling. He described them as conscious beings, or perhaps sophisticated computers, holding the collective knowledge of ancient elders. Through his writings and lectures, Nosrino and others like him wove a complex spiritual narrative that was completely separate from the world of museums and carbon dating. This new story was not concerned with physical proof. It thrived on personal experience, on feelings of energy, and on the powerful human desire to connect with a hidden, mystical past. A person holding a crystal skull might report feeling a gentle vibration, a sense of warmth, or a flood of mental images. These deeply personal, subjective experiences became the new evidence, creating a belief system that was impervious to scientific debunking. How do you prove that someone did not feel a healing energy? How can a microscope measure a prophecy? This spiritual narrative created a powerful feedback loop. The more people believed in the skull's powers, the more intense their experiences became, and the more those experiences were shared, strengthening the myth. The skulls transformed from questionable artifacts into sacred talismans for a new age, their true power lying not in their origin, but in the profound human capacity for belief itself. The 1920s crackled with a desperate hunger for wonder. The First World War had just ended, leaving a world scarred by unprecedented mechanized violence and disillusioned with old certainties. In this void, a new fascination bloomed, one that looked away from the grim present toward the exotic mysteries of the past and the unseen realms of the spirit. People flocked to seances to contact lost loved ones. Newspapers devoured tales of lost cities discovered in remote jungles. This was the golden age of what we now call adventure archaeology, where figures like Howard Carter, who opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, became global celebrities. The public did not want dry academic facts. They wanted drama, they wanted treasure, and they wanted proof of a world more magical than the one they lived in. Into this perfect cultural storm, the crystal skulls emerged. It was precisely in this decade that Anna Mitchell-Hedges claimed her famous discovery, and other prominent skulls began circulating through the hands of collectors and dealers. The timing was no coincidence. These objects were the ultimate commodity for this new appetite. They combined the thrill of archaeology with the allure of spiritualism, a physical object that seemed to promise a connection to both a lost civilization and a hidden cosmic truth. But who was supplying this demand? The answer lies not in the jungles of Central America, but in the workshops of Europe, particularly in Germany and France. Idar Oberstein, a German town renowned for its lapidary arts for centuries, had the skilled craftsmen and the advanced polishing technology needed to create such flawless objects. These artisans were masters of their trade, capable of carving incredibly intricate designs from the hardest stones. Using their modern, rotating wheel tools and newly invented abrasives, they could produce a level of perfection that would have been impossible for any ancient civilization. And they had a ready market. The 1920s were a boom time for a certain kind of wealthy collector, the kind who wanted a dramatic conversation piece for their cabinet of curiosities. An object with a mysterious, unverifiable past was far more valuable and intriguing than one with a boring, documented history. A dealer could spin a tale of Aztec priests or Atlantean elders, and the buyer, caught up in the romantic spirit of the age, was all too willing to believe. The skulls were not unearthed relics. They were manufactured myths, products designed and sold to fill a profound human need for mystery in a world that had become, for many, disenchanted. If the culture of the 20s created the perfect conditions for this deception, then who were the specific individuals who masterminded it, and what was the web that connected them all? At the center of this tangled web of artifacts and legends stands a single, enigmatic figure. His name was Eugene Bobin, a French antiquities dealer whose career perfectly mirrors the rise of the crystal skulls themselves. Bobin was a man of his time, a savvy entrepreneur who first traveled to Mexico in the 1860s, capitalizing on the European craze for all things pre-Columbian. He presented himself as a distinguished scholar and a reliable source, supplying museums and wealthy collectors with genuine artifacts, building a reputation for knowledge and integrity. But behind this respectable facade, Bobin was also a purveyor of the spectacular and the dubious. He was directly linked to at least 3 of the most famous crystal skulls, including the one sold to the British Museum by Tiffany and Company. In fact, records strongly suggest that Tiffany's acquired that very skull from Bobin himself. Here was a man who moved seamlessly between the worlds of legitimate archaeology and outright forgery, understanding that a compelling story could often be more valuable than the object itself. The skulls were the perfect product for his business model. They were visually stunning, mysterious, and completely unverifiable. He could present them as the ultimate lost treasure of the Aztecs, knowing full well that no European curator had the reference materials to definitively prove him wrong. The evidence points to Bobin not merely as a seller, but likely as the original commissioner of these objects, placing orders with the sophisticated workshops in Idar Oberstein to feed the growing demand. He was not a simple con man, but a master of perception, giving his clients exactly what they wanted, a tangible piece of a myth. So the great mystery of the crystal skulls may not be a mystery of ancient times at all, but a story of 19th century ambition, clever marketing, and a public desperate to believe in something magical. The workshops of Idar Oberstein were not dark, mysterious places. They were centers of brilliant technical achievement, humming with the sound of modern industry. For generations, the artisans in this German town had perfected the art of carving the world's hardest stones. They possessed a secret weapon, the horizontal lapidary wheel, powered first by water and later by steam. This rotating wheel, combined with ever more refined diamond dust abrasives, allowed them to achieve a level of polish and precision that was simply unattainable by any ancient civilization. These carvers could take a block of cloudy quartz and transform it into a flawless, transparent masterpiece, their work defined by a perfection that looked almost machined. Across the Alps in Milan, Italian craftsmen were also renowned for their skill in creating intricate hardstone carvings, supplying a thriving European market for luxury goods. These workshops were the true birthplaces of the crystal skulls. The evidence points to them fulfilling private commissions for dealers like Eugene Boban, who understood that a clientele fascinated by the exotic would pay a premium for an object that seemed to hold an ancient, untold story. This was not a cottage industry of forgery, but a sophisticated commercial enterprise. The carvers were not creating fakes, they were simply producing what was ordered, applying their unparalleled skill to a new and curious form, a human skull. Their expertise was in the carving, not the con. The deception began the moment the finished object left their workshop, and a dealer wrapped it in a fabricated history. So the great irony is that the very perfection that made the skulls so compelling, the flawless surfaces and precise anatomy, is the very proof of their modern origins. That perfection was not a mystery, it was a sales receipt, pointing directly to the advanced technology of 19th century Europe. If they were products of such skilled and known workshops, why did the myth of their ancient power only grow stronger in the century that followed? For decades, the great museums of the world were the skull's most powerful validators. Displayed in hushed halls behind protective glass, objects like the British Museum skull were presented to the public as genuine pre-Columbian masterpieces. Their labels spoke of the Aztecs or the Maya, lending them an air of academic certainty that their shadowy origins simply did not deserve. They became centerpieces, drawing crowds who marveled at their beauty and accepted their ancient pedigree as fact. The museum's authority had, perhaps unintentionally, completed the deception that dealers like Boban had begun, but this position of honor was not destined to last. A quiet revolution was brewing within the very institutions that housed them, led by a new generation of curators and scientists armed with better tools and a more critical eye. The initial unease, that stylistic feeling that something was not quite right, was no longer enough. It was time to move from suspicion to proof. The process of re-evaluation was slow and methodical, driven by a commitment to intellectual honesty over popular appeal. Curators began to openly question the accepted narratives, comparing the skulls directly to verified artifacts in their own collections. The differences became impossible to ignore. The more they looked, the clearer it became that these objects were stylistic orphans, belonging to no known ancient tradition. This growing scholarly doubt culminated in a decisive shift from art historical analysis to hard scientific testing. The development of powerful scanning electron microscopes gave researchers the ability to see the story etched into the crystal at a microscopic level. When they examined the British Museum skull, the parallel grooves left by a modern jeweler's wheel were unmistakable. The final, irrefutable evidence came with the identification of carborundum, the synthetic abrasive that sealed the skull's fate as a modern creation. Faced with this undeniable data, the museums had to make a choice. They could continue to display an object they now knew to be a fake, or they could publicly correct the record. One by one, they chose truth. The British Museum, the Smithsonian, and the Musée du Quai Branly all quietly declassified their crystal skulls. The labels were changed, the official catalogs were updated, and the objects were removed from their prominent displays of ancient American art. They were recategorized not as archaeological treasures, but as artifacts of the 19th century, fascinating objects in their own right that told a different, and perhaps even more human story. The journey from revered relic to exposed fake was complete, a testament to the fact that even our most cherished institutions must sometimes admit they were wrong. But if the museums had closed their case, why did the legend only seem to grow stronger outside their walls? The debate could not linger in the realm of speculation forever. With the dawn of the 21st century, the technology finally existed to deliver a final, unambiguous verdict. The world's leading institutions, the British Museum and the Smithsonian, decided to collaborate on a definitive investigation, subjecting their respective crystal skulls to the most advanced scientific scrutiny available. The centerpiece of their analysis was the scanning electron microscope, a tool capable of magnifying a surface tens of thousands of times, revealing a microscopic world invisible to the naked eye. This was not merely looking at the skulls, it was entering them, reading the story written in the finest scratches on their polished quartz surfaces. The researchers were searching for the ghost in the machine, the faintest impression of the tools that had carved them. What they found was a narrative written in parallel lines. The entire surface of the British Museum skull was covered in perfectly straight, unidirectional grooves. These were not the random, multidirectional scratches left by hand-powered ancient tools and sand abrasives. This was the unmistakable signature of a high-speed, rotating cutting wheel, a technology that simply did not exist before the Industrial Revolution. The clarity of the evidence was stunning. Under the immense magnification, they could even identify the specific abrasive particles embedded in those microscopic grooves. The analysis confirmed the presence of synthetic silicon carbide, the industrial abrasive known as carborundum. This substance, a product of modern electric furnace technology first created in the 1890s, was the final nail in the coffin for any claim of ancient origins. An Aztec artist could not have used a tool that would not be invented for centuries, nor an abrasive powder that was still decades away from being synthesized in a laboratory. For the scientific community, the case was conclusively closed. The crystal skulls were not mysterious artifacts from a lost world. They were products of the 19th century, carved with the very tools that define the modern era. The great archaeological mystery was solved, but if science had reached its verdict, why did the legend refuse to die? Science may have solved the mystery of their origin, but it cannot explain their enduring power. The human mind is the final and most fertile ground where the legend of the crystal skulls truly grows. Consider the object itself. It is a human skull, a universal and potent symbol of mortality, rendered in a material we associate with clarity, energy, and permanence. This combination is psychologically irresistible. Our brains are hardwired for pareidolia, the instinct to see faces in random patterns, in clouds or rock formations. A crystal skull is not a random pattern. It is a perfect neutral face, a blank slate onto which we can project our own thoughts, fears, and hopes. Staring into its translucent depths, a person is not just looking at a carved rock. They are looking at a version of themselves, a silent, knowing counterpart made of pure light. This triggers a deep, almost primal sense of connection. We feel it is watching us, communicating with us, precisely because our own brain's face recognition circuitry is firing at full force. The material amplifies this effect. Across countless cultures, crystal and quartz have been linked to spiritual power, healing, and cosmic energy. We speak of clear thinking and crystalline clarity. The object's physical purity suggests a metaphysical purity. It feels like a conduit, something that should channel forces beyond our understanding. This is not a logical process. It is a visceral, emotional response to an object that perfectly mimics a sacred relic. When someone holds a skull and reports feeling a warm vibration or a sense of peace, they are experiencing something very real. That sensation, however, is far more likely a testament to the power of suggestion and the mind-body connection than to any energy stored in the quartz. The brain, convinced it is holding something magical, can generate profound physical and emotional feelings. This is the same mechanism behind the placebo effect, where belief alone can produce measurable changes. The skull becomes a focus for meditation, a physical anchor for the mind's own vast and suggestible power. So why do people cling to the mystical stories despite the overwhelming scientific evidence? Because the evidence lives in the world of facts, but the experience lives in the world of meaning. For a believer, the personal sensation of warmth or a fleeting vision holds more weight than a laboratory report about carborundum abrasives. The myth fulfills a profound human need for wonder, for a direct personal connection to something greater than the mundane world. It offers a narrative that is far more compelling than the truth of a 19th century workshop. We are not just rational creatures, we are storytelling creatures, and sometimes a beautiful story that makes us feel special and connected is a truth we choose to keep, regardless of where it was actually made. Science may have stripped the skulls of their ancient past, but it inadvertently handed them a new and far more powerful identity. Freed from the dusty shelves of archaeology, they were adopted as living companions in the world of New Age spirituality. Here, their value is not measured in centuries, but in the energy they are believed to hold and transmit. In meditation, a crystal skull is not an artifact to be studied, but a partner for inner exploration. Practitioners place them in sacred circles, hold them during sessions, or simply gaze into their depths, reporting that the crystal helps to amplify their intentions, quiet mental chatter, and facilitate a deeper connection to their higher selves or spiritual guides. The physical object becomes a lens, focusing the mind's own potential. This use extends beyond personal practice into a concept known as energy grid work. Believers position multiple skulls at specific points on the land, in their homes, or on elaborate geometric patterns, envisioning them as energetic nodes that can heal the earth, raise global consciousness, or stabilize the environment. In this worldview, the skulls are not passive carvings. They are active participants in a vast, invisible network of power. The most profound role assigned to them is that of a channel. Some metaphysical practitioners claim to be able to communicate directly with the consciousness they believe resides within the skull. They may receive messages, visions, or downloads of information, which they then share as wisdom from ancient civilizations, extraterrestrial beings, or the earth itself. This practice transforms the object from a tool into a teacher, a source of divine revelation that operates outside any established religious doctrine. This has given rise to a unique and deeply personal community of skull keepers. These are individuals who do not merely collect the skulls, they care for them as conscious entities. Each skull is given a unique name, like Shah Na Ra or Max, and is believed to possess its own distinct personality, gender, and spiritual purpose. A keeper might describe one skull as a gentle healer, another as a stern teacher of ancient truths, and a third as a playful child. They speak to their skulls, cleanse them in moonlight or with sage smoke, and introduce them to other skulls in social gatherings. This is not a metaphor for them. It is a living, breathing tradition built on a foundation of deep personal relationship. The power of the crystal skull, then, has undergone a complete transformation. Its authority no longer comes from a fabricated history, but from the direct, subjective experiences of thousands of people who find meaning, comfort, and connection in its silent, translucent gaze. The question is no longer who made it, but what it helps us to become. Yet history itself could not compete with the power of Hollywood. In 2008, the legend of the Crystal Skulls was launched into the stratosphere with the release of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The film masterfully wove together every thread of the existing myth. It resurrected the old Nazi obsession with occult artifacts, pitted our hero against Soviet agents instead, and presented the skulls not merely as ancient relics, but as the remains of interdimensional beings. These weren't just carved stones, they were the ultimate MacGuffin, a key to unlocking cosmic power and advanced knowledge that could tip the balance of the Cold War. The film presented a version of the skulls that was infinitely more exciting than the mundane truth. It was a perfect storm of pop culture alchemy, blending pseudo-archaeology, science fiction, and classic adventure into a single, irresistible package. For millions of viewers, this fictional narrative became the primary source of their knowledge. The line between entertainment and fact blurred into invisibility. The movie didn't just reference the myth, it supercharged it, adding layers of alien technology and psychic communication that the 19th century forgers could never have imagined. Suddenly, the question was no longer whether the skulls were Aztec. It was whether they were extraterrestrial. This cinematic treatment did more than just entertain. It actively reshaped public memory, creating a new hybrid legend that was far more resilient than the old one. How could a simple museum label about 19th century carving techniques possibly compete with the thrilling image of Harrison Ford holding a glowing skull that could melt faces and open portals to other worlds? The film cemented the crystal skull's status as a modern icon, but in doing so, it buried the historical reality under an avalanche of pure, unadulterated spectacle. The idea of a 19th century workshop feels too small for such a perfect object. For those who find the scientific explanation unsatisfying, the crystal skulls demand a grander origin story, one that reaches beyond recorded history into the realms of pure myth. This is where the legends of Atlantis and alien visitors take root. Proponents of the Atlantean theory argue that the skulls are not carvings at all, but sophisticated data storage devices created by that fabled, technologically advanced civilization. In this narrative, the skulls survived the cataclysm that sank the continent, preserving the entire knowledge of a lost world within their crystalline structure, waiting to be unlocked by a spiritually evolved humanity. The flawless craftsmanship, impossible for any known ancient culture, is presented not as proof of a modern hoax, but as evidence of a forgotten, superior technology. Similarly, the extraterrestrial hypothesis suggests the skulls are artifacts left behind by ancient astronauts, either as communication devices, navigational aids, or perhaps even the physical forms of the beings themselves. Their perfect anatomical form is explained as a model of an alien visitor's own physiology, or a universal design chosen for its powerful symbolic resonance. Why do these extraordinary theories persist with such vigor? They thrive because they fill a vacuum. When an object appears too perfect, too anomalous to fit our established understanding of history, the human mind rebels against the mundane answer. It is far more thrilling to believe that we are the inheritors of Atlantean wisdom, or that we are not alone in the universe, than to accept that a skilled German carver created a beautiful curiosity for a wealthy collector. These narratives are part of a much broader pattern, a cultural reflex to attribute any unexplained artifact to a lost civilization or otherworldly beings. From the pyramids of Giza to the massive stone spheres of Costa Rica, objects that challenge our timeline are often draped in the glamour of Atlantis or the mystery of alien engineering. It is a way of making sense of the inexplicable by connecting it to a grander, more magical version of our past. The crystal skull becomes a tangible key to that hidden world, a physical piece of evidence for a history we desperately wish was true. The scientific evidence may point to Idar Oberstein, but the human heart will always yearn for Atlantis. The legend has become its own economy, a self-sustaining cycle of desire and supply. While the original museum pieces were exposed as 19th century fakes, the demand for crystal skulls did not vanish, it simply evolved, finding new ways to fulfill the timeless human need for mystery. Today, the market is flooded with skulls carved not in obscure German workshops, but in modern factories primarily in China and Brazil. These facilities use advanced, computer-guided machinery and industrial diamond saws to mass-produce thousands of crystal skulls every year. They are carved from a variety of minerals, from clear quartz and amethyst to rose quartz and obsidian, catering to every aesthetic and budget. You can order a small, tumbled stone skull for a few dollars online, or a massive, museum-quality piece for thousands. This industrial production has completely democratized ownership, placing a piece of the myth into the hands of anyone who wants it. Yet this very accessibility creates a new layer of intrigue. Among these countless new skulls, a more shadowy trade persists. Unscrupulous dealers will sometimes take a modern, mass-produced skull and artificially age it, burying it in dirt or treating it with chemicals to give it a patina of antiquity. They then weave a new, fabricated provenance, claiming it was discovered in a remote part of Mexico or passed down through a family of shamans. These stories are designed to inflate the price and prestige of an object that may have rolled off an assembly line just months before. The commercial engine first started by Eugene Boban is still running, now powered by global e-commerce and social media. The legend itself is the most valuable commodity, and it is a resource that never depletes. Every time a blockbuster film is rerun, or a new spiritual book is published, a new wave of customers enters the market, eager to own a tangible piece of the enigma. So the crystal skull endures not as an archaeological artifact, but as a perfect symbol of our own era, an object whose true story is one of perpetual reinvention, driven by the timeless and profitable power of a good story. Despite the scientific consensus, a compelling counter-argument continues to captivate a dedicated few. This perspective asks us to look past the museum labels and consider the object itself. How could any civilization, ancient or modern, achieve such perfection in one of the world's hardest stones without leaving a single tool mark? For believers, this flawlessness is not evidence of a 19th century wheel, but proof of a technology we have since forgotten. They propose methods that sound like science fiction, perhaps advanced sonic carving tools that used precise sound vibrations to shape the quartz, or some form of chemical softening that allowed artisans to mold the crystal like clay. The very perfection that scientists cite as proof of modern manufacture is seen by others as the hallmark of a lost, superior knowledge. This argument extends beyond the physical into the realm of feeling. Many who have spent time with the skulls report tangible sensations, a gentle hum or a warmth that seems to emanate from the crystal itself. While science attributes this to the power of suggestion or the mind's own heightened state, those who experience it argue that the feeling is too real, too consistent, to be dismissed. They contend that this perceived energy is a residual property of the skull's true age and purpose, an ancient power that our modern instruments are simply too crude to measure. If we only trust what can be seen under a microscope, are we missing a deeper truth that can only be felt? For this minority, the skulls are not mere carvings, but relics of a time when humanity understood the subtle energies of the earth and how to work with them, a wisdom that has since faded into legend. The debate, therefore, is not just about when the skulls were made, but about the very nature of evidence itself, forcing us to choose between the cold, hard facts of the laboratory and the warm, compelling truth of personal experience. Anna Mitchell-Hedges dedicated her entire adult life to the object she claimed to have discovered. For over 6 decades, she was the skull's guardian, its public face, and its most passionate evangelist. She traveled the world with the artifact, presenting it not as a mere curiosity, but as a living, breathing mystery. At lectures and exhibitions, she would recount the story of its discovery with unwavering conviction, her narrative polished smooth by countless retellings. She spoke of its perfect craftsmanship, its missing jaw found months later, and the profound sense of destiny she felt upon unearthing it. Under her care, the skull was more than a possession. It was her legacy, her life's work, and her constant companion. She cultivated an aura of spiritual significance around it, suggesting it held ancient knowledge and psychic power, often allowing visitors to hold it in darkened rooms to witness its alleged luminescence or to feel its mysterious energy. This personal mythology was powerful and persuasive. People were not just looking at a crystal carving, they were listening to the woman who found it, a woman whose entire identity was intertwined with the artifact's own story. What drove this lifelong commitment? Was it a sincere belief born from that moment in the jungle, or was it a performance that had to be maintained once the initial story was told? Her motivations remain as layered as the legend itself. For Anna, the skull guaranteed her a place in a grand adventure. It transformed her from the adoptive daughter of an adventurer into an adventurer in her own right, a key figure in an international enigma. To recant or even to question the story would have been to dismantle the very foundation of her public identity. Her testimony became an unshakable pillar of the myth, because her life and the skull's story were one and the same. Long after scientists had dismissed the object as a modern fake, Anna's personal conviction continued to lend it an air of authenticity that cold, hard facts could not easily erase. This fringe theory bypasses the carver's workshop entirely, proposing that the skulls were never shaped by human hands, but were instead grown into their perfect form. The proposed mechanism is something called hydrothermal synthesis, a process we use today to create quartz crystals in laboratories. In nature, quartz forms deep underground when mineral-rich water, heated by the Earth's magma, fills cavities and slowly deposits silicon dioxide over thousands of years, building crystals atom by atom. In a lab, we can replicate this by placing a small seed crystal in a high-pressure chamber filled with a hot, silica-saturated solution. Over weeks or months, new crystal grows in layers upon that seed, its final shape dictated by the inherent structure of the quartz itself, which naturally forms six-sided prisms. For a crystal skull to form this way, it would require a seed crystal carved into the exact shape of a human skull, placed in a perfectly shaped cavity that would guide the growth to maintain that impossibly complex anatomical form. The process would have to flawlessly replicate the subtle curves of a brow ridge, the intricate architecture of a nasal cavity, and the precise hinge of a detachable jaw, all while maintaining optical clarity. The sheer statistical improbability of this happening by natural geological chance is beyond astronomical. It is the equivalent of a tornado blowing through a junkyard and assembling a functioning jet engine. So why does this idea hold such appeal for some? Because it offers a scientific-sounding escape hatch from the mundane truth. If the skulls were grown, not carved, then their perfection is no longer proof of a modern workshop, but evidence of a lost, hyper-advanced science. It transforms them from fakes into marvels, relics of an Atlantis that mastered the very forces of crystal growth. This theory satisfies the deep-seated desire for the objects to be as extraordinary as they appear, placing their origin just beyond the edge of our current understanding, in a realm where anything feels possible. The crystal skulls expose a deeper wound in the world of archaeology, one that goes far beyond questions of authenticity. These objects are prime examples of a troubling category known as unprovenanced artifacts, items that appear on the market with no documented history of where they were found. Without that crucial context, an artifact is like a single page torn from a history book. We might appreciate the words on that page, but we have no idea which chapter it came from, what story it was part of, or what the pages before and after it had to say. An object stripped of its provenance is stripped of its true meaning. It becomes a beautiful mystery, but a historical dead end. The romantic stories attached to the skulls, those tales of lost Mayan cities and anonymous soldiers, were not just harmless fun. They were a smokescreen, carefully designed to obscure the fact that these objects had no legitimate archaeological birthplace. This practice fuels a cycle of deception that ultimately damages our shared human heritage. When a high-profile object like a crystal skull is celebrated without proof, it creates a demand for more. Looters are incentivized to raid unprotected archaeological sites, digging haphazardly through ancient layers to pull out anything that can be sold. In their rush, they destroy the very context that gives those objects meaning. They shatter pottery, scatter human remains, and obliterate the subtle soil stains that show where a post hole stood or a hearth was lit. The site itself is the real historical record, and looting erases it forever, all for the sake of a single saleable item. This isn't just about lost artifacts. It's about lost knowledge. Every looted site is a library burned to the ground before a single page could be read. The forgeries and fantastical stories make this problem worse by creating a market where truth is optional. A collector eager to own a piece of a glamorous legend may not ask too many questions. They purchase an object with a fabricated history, and their acquisition lends that fake story a veneer of credibility. This cycle distorts our understanding of the past, filling museums and private collections with objects that have no real connection to the cultures they are claimed to represent. We end up building a fantasy history, one crafted by 19th century dealers and 20th century spiritualists, rather than one grounded in the careful, unglamorous work of excavation and analysis. So the next time you see a mysterious artifact with a thrilling story, ask yourself about the silence surrounding its origins. That silence may be the most telling part of its history, echoing the destruction of a site and the loss of a story we can never get back. The truth is, we are not looking for an answer as much as we are looking for the question itself. The crystal skulls persist in our culture because they are more than just objects. They are blank slates, a cultural Rorschach test where we see reflected our own deepest yearnings. For some, they are proof of a more magical past, a time of Atlantis and advanced wisdom. For others, they represent a rebellion against the dry, often dismissive authority of mainstream science. A laboratory report can tell you what something is made of and when it was likely carved, but it cannot measure wonder. It cannot quantify the chill that runs down your spine when you hold a perfectly carved crystal skull in your hands and feel, just for a moment, that you are touching a secret. This is the fundamental power of a good story over a cold, hard fact. The scientific narrative is settled, yet it feels incomplete to many because it leaves no room for magic. It tells us how, but it fails to answer why we feel such a profound connection to these artifacts in the first place. The human desire for mystery is a powerful force. In a world that often feels fully mapped and explained, we crave enigmas that remind us that the universe is still strange and full of possibilities. The skulls provide a safe, tangible focus for that desire. They are an anchor for our imagination, a physical object that gives weight to our speculation about lost worlds and unseen energies. Ultimately, the greatest mystery of the crystal skulls is not their origin, but our own relentless need to believe in something beyond the ordinary. They endure because we want them to. So the evidence points overwhelmingly to a 19th century European workshop, not a lost Mayan temple. The microscopic scratches of modern tools and the telltale traces of synthetic abrasives provide a clear, scientific verdict. These objects were born from the skilled hands of artisans in towns like Idar Oberstein, masterfully marketed by dealers like Eugene Boban to a public hungry for exotic wonders. Yet this factual origin story has done little to dim their powerful allure. The myths of psychic power, lost continents, and extraterrestrial messages have proven far more resilient than the quartz itself. This enduring paradox reveals the true nature of the crystal skulls. They are not windows into an ancient world, but mirrors reflecting our own timeless fascination with the mysterious. They show us that the human need for wonder, for a connection to something greater than the mundane, is a force more powerful than any laboratory finding. We are drawn to the enigma, to the beautiful story, even when we know its origins are a carefully crafted illusion. The skulls challenge us to ask what we are really searching for when we gaze into their polished, translucent depths. Are we seeking answers from the past, or are we projecting our own hopes for a more magical world? The investigation is complete, but the conversation is far from over. We want to hear from you. Have you ever held a crystal skull or felt its legendary energy? Share your own stories and thoughts in the comments below.